Welcome to Maximum Resilience with me, Kelly Bazzani, as we go on this epic journey of how to own your power and the steps to take that lead you towards an incredible life of maximum resilience. This educational, powerful, engaging, and inspiring show will levitate your mind, strengthen your emotional resilience, and revolutionize the approach that ensures mental health as we consciously address a worldwide epidemic. Wisdom is key. Let's shift the paradigm, embodying mental and emotional wellness. We do recover. Experience the transformation from victim to victor, giving rise to living your best life. Here's the secret: to learn how to master unleashing your full potential every day in every way. Maximum resilience starts now. Hey everybody, welcome to Maximum Resilience with me, Kelly Bazzani. Happy June. I cannot believe we are halfway through this year already. I am so excited for today's show. Just a couple of quick announcements. This is my last show on the Transformation Network, so I wanted to do a special shout out to Dr. Pat and her production team, who have been absolutely incredible, that I've been working with all year, and a special shout out to Jessica Henderson, who has been absolutely amazing in helping me to launch my new website. So if you haven't gone to my new website yet, please do. It is absolutely brilliant at www.kellybazzani.com. On my website, you will find my book, The Change Insight into Self-Empowerment, where you can purchase your copy. It is on my homepage. Also on there is the speaking page. It is just so beautiful. So visit that. Also, I am so excited about today's show as we kick off June, as everybody is graduating. I'm sure all of you are going to graduations or graduation parties. And so I would also like to do a special shout out to my nephew, Joaquin Atilio Rivas, who just graduated. And it is so beautiful to be able to do this show because both my sister, Amy Bazzani Rivas, and her husband, Jesus Rivas, are both educators in the educational system for over 25 years. So I just wanted to honor them as we do this show, because I've watched them navigate the educational system through this pandemic and afterwards and use their brilliance. And so I want to especially introduce my guest today, who is one of my dearest friends that I've been working with for about 3.5 years now. And she is also one of the most brilliant educators with one of the most brilliant minds that I have had the honor to meet and work with. And we just have this soul connection that is really, I can't really speak about it in words because it's just this connection that is so deep for me. And so to have her on my show today to talk about the impact of the pandemic on both educators and students and talk about the solution to emotional wellness is just really an honor to have for my last show. So without further ado, I want to introduce my beautiful friend, Lisa Stubenrauch. I had to ask her how to pronounce her last name. I'm like, Lisa, how do we pronounce your last name? I've never even had to say it. So Lisa, welcome to Maximum Resilience. And let's talk about how you got into education and what inspired you to do so as we kick off our show, The Power of Education Matters. Welcome.
Thank you so much. That was an awesome introduction. I love all of it. I really am grateful for our relationship and just how soul deep we can go, living from the inside out. And I am not who I am without everyone in my life too, my students, my colleagues, you included, everyone in my family and friends that are teachers. And what's really funny is that I didn't realize I wanted to become an educator probably until my early 30s, which was about 10 years ago now, yet I've been around it my whole life. My father was an educator, English as a second language teacher for 50 years. He started that journey in Ethiopia where he met my mom. Then as I was growing up, I made a lot of memories in New York City where he would teach at an adult school in a neighborhood called Soho. So the staff and students there, Chinese and Spanish departments, just took me in as their own. So I was able to see at a very young age that what the teaching and learning process was like and what it could be. Just overall being raised in a multicultural community, family, I was exposed to a wide range of backgrounds, perspectives, experiences that really have shaped the way that I view education now. I'm a world traveler thanks to my family. From when I was 6 years old, I've been fortunate to experience the world, and fortunate to still be traveling now. And when I moved to California, I'm originally from New Jersey. I moved in 2009, and I thought to myself, I was at a crossroads. I didn't know what to do with all my experiences. I just knew that I wanted to share them. So I'm like, how do I share them? And I was working at FedEx at the time. I was a driver, and then I got introduced to cultural exchange programs with Education First, a homestay program. So that was my comfort zone, right? So you had other countries coming. We would host trips. We'd teach them English, and then it hit me that teaching would be the best way to share my experiences and shape my own growth and lifelong learning journey. So that's how that happened. And that became a philosophy that, learning, when it's a constant in one's life, it really can, it serves as a companion when feeling lost or marginalized, right? So a sense of self. It really is a vessel that opens doors to versatile experiences. It sustains independent thinking, lifelong learning. And, that's happened from myself within to without. So I really find that education is the single most powerful agent of change, I feel like. I mean, it could be used as a tool for good and bad, but really it can empower individuals and communities alike, to come together in solidarity, right? And just have a sense of self, and
I could not agree with you more. I could not agree with you more. And I love everything that you had to say, because I always say, I feel educators should be the highest paid profession, right? Because without education, where would we all be? If we weren't educated on how to be a doctor, educated on how to be a therapist, educated on how to be an engineer, or what would we do without educators?
Right.
So I feel like you just explained it. It is like everything I feel when I coach is it's a lifelong learning, is a lifelong process. We never stop learning and growing.
Right.
If we're open to lifelong learning, and like if we're open to curiosity about lifelong learning, which we're going to talk about when we talk about emotional wellness, we open ourselves up to so many possibilities in life.
Yeah.
And so I'm so excited to have you, because you've expanded your knowledge. You have your bachelor's, you got your master's, you got everything. You just have continued to learn and expand in your curriculum. So I'm so excited, because let's just get right into it, right? So I want to start with a quote, right? Both the COVID-19 pandemic and economic conditions in California have contributed to significant changes in enrollment in schools across the state. So enrollment dropped by a record, Lisa, 2.6% in 2020, 2021, and an additional almost 2% in 2021, 2022, resulting in a loss of 270,000 students statewide. And then in addition, the California test score shows the devastating impact of the pandemic on student learning. So test scores are showing a substantial decline in learning in both ELA, which, if people don't know, the language arts, and mathematics specifically. So I want to talk about, what was your experience as an educator during this pandemic? What did you notice? What did you start to observe with your clients?
Yeah.
Not clients, but students,
Yeah, students, right? Even myself. I mean, so we went on distance learning. I remember we were live in person, and they were like, okay, school's going to be shut down, whatever, in that mid-March. But we didn't know we were never going to come back. So just that initial, wow, wait, we can't come back. What does that mean? And that expectation just being crushed. And then how, having to think of how to systematically work things on the fly, right? Because this is the first time something like this has ever happened, especially in our technology age. So distance learning was extremely hard. It really exposed the disproportionality and access that students had, say, to the internet. It really showed in some cases how home lives weren't the best. We had a lot of kids who were foster homelessness. I mean, it just brought out and brought into light the worst parts of society. And like, how can we accommodate this learning loss. So we're on distance learning, and, you know, the kids, from my perspective, you know, I feel like I'm a radio host at 2 a.m. just speaking into nobody, because there's like blank screens, having to engage the students, not having that human in-person connection was probably the roughest thing. And then when we came back, just not knowing how to be with each other. So that social emotional wellness is definitely at the core of learning loss. So it didn't even matter, right? Then questioning testing. What is testing? What is having to reimagine education. But the biggest toll was, I'd say, on students' mental health, and that coupled with technology and media that's been kind of confirmation bias and polarizing, and, you know, all those effects. Then we're back in person, and no one knows how to be with each other anymore. So we had to
Yes.
deal with that.
Yes. And I can tell you from my perspective, you know, from the coaching side, when I started to receive clients, it was all adolescents. You know, it was like, because they were taken away. And I remember, and you remember, Lisa, from our adolescence, I mean, what was our whole world based around at that age? Connection and relations with our friendships. And so you take that away. And I remember saying to my fellow coaches, like, mental health is going to be our next pandemic, because it's not receiving any attention. You know, you have this division and this disconnection, because at any point we're creating connection or disconnection with ourselves or others. And so we have this complete separation. And then all of a sudden we're so dependent on electronics and cell phones and this and that. And so it creates this kind of like disconnect from relation. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, let's go back. And the coping skills and knowing how to be with each other in relation, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, I kept getting all these with anxiety or depressions or social anxieties, panic attacks. So what do you see now being the lasting effects with your students and having on your educational system and overall, like holistically on you and your students because of this?
Yeah. It's still there. It's almost like when we came back, even now this year, seniors were really sophomores. So their cognitive development. I mean, I'm also, you know, a psychology teacher. So everything has to do with cognitive development, emotional wellness. So not having the soft and hard skills to articulate or self-express, even articulate their own feelings, how they're feeling, how to advocate for their own learning, how to build relationships with each other. That was all gone. And just learning how to be present in the moment versus sucked into whatever your phone is, right? And also literacy. So by literacy, I mean not just reading and writing, but, you know, how to speak, all the different modalities, how to read your world, right? Versus basing it off of stereotype and assumption, because the internet can be very, you know, and the media can be very curating. They curate these experiences, right? That are not necessarily real.
Yes.
So it's kind of like navigating through all of those things of what's real, what's misinformation, what's, you know, disinformation campaigns. You're fighting against a system that's, you know, a device that trying to device us. Not totally, but yeah. So
yes, because I see, you know, when you post how much your students love you, I see the cards that they write you, I see the support that you give them. And so when we're trying to, when, you know, I see a lot of people like getting a loss of identity, you know, when they were in person, you know, they were like, you know, I'm an athlete, or I'm a student, or I'm a scholar, or I'm a this. And then you take that all away. And like you say, you're like, who am I in relation? Relationships and relations are so important. So when you're shape-shifting these identities during a time of, I want to say uncertainty, that's what it is. When things are uncertain, we tend to, you and I know how to go from a place of abundance and create possibility, because we've been trained that with our psychology background. But for these kids, they go into that place of scarcity or fear. And so when you're educating them and you're trying to shape shift the identity during this time of uncertainty or disconnection or isolation or loneliness, how do you teach them who they are in relation to each other, or how do you get that connection back for them?
Right. And that's like you said, my students, especially this year, I mean, I rose out of the ashes like a phoenix. I feel like if it weren't for this new program of ethnic studies that I piloted this year, and all of my students in the IB history class and psychology, it was like, and ethnic studies, three different perspectives, and they all agreed that this year we created a safe environment. There were some unique approaches to the learning experiences to try and engage students. And I think that's really what it is. And we just have to throw content, fact, states, and everything out the window and just start from scratch and build with each other.
Yes. And I want to just point out that if you aren't taking care of yourself and making sure that you are in a place of emotional wellness, then you can't model that to your students, right? And so that's what people kind of forget, is that your students are going through it, but you're also trying to adapt and shift and change to this huge kind of upside down during this. So your focus is on this social and emotional wellness because you're taking care of yourself first from the inside out. So you're showing up in your role as an educator. And so what does that look like for you? Because the National Institute of Health defines emotional wellness as the ability to successfully handle life stresses and adapt to change and difficult times.
Yes.
So what was your first priority when this was hitting for you as an educator?
And I just came out of this, and I think I might have said this to you another time. Like, for the first time, I feel like I have this inner freedom. So for me, it really meant dropping these old behaviors of my own that I didn't even realize, right? I'm over explaining, I'm second guessing myself, and all of that negative talk, or, that was occupying my head. And through, work, being a teacher, it's hard work and it's also heart work. We
Yes.
our heart on our sleeves. We're super vulnerable. We're always, we're not trusted. We don't get paid enough, all these things. So it's hard to come out of that. So you have to force yourself to self-care. And I consider myself like this sassy extrovert, who's very friendly and um loves to engage and talk with people. But it's just, if you're a teacher, that, imagine being a lawyer and having 30 clients at once, or a doctor and having 30 to 40 patients at once. It's just so much in the moment. We make more decisions in a split second than a brain surgeon. So even though I'm an extrovert, I still need to, how do I fill my own well after I'm empty? Um, and for me, it's literally been like sleep has been great, nature has been great, and just reconnecting and deepening my connections with the people around me, being open-minded to connecting with new people who I will grow with in the future, and maybe just pausing relationships that, don't serve me anymore, that are draining, which is hard in itself also. So navigating your own personal life, I mean, it's just like being on a plane, right? With the oxygen mask, they tell you to put it on yourself first before you help others. Otherwise, the kids see it, whether you have your own children or students, they can see right through you. They're very brilliant.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And I'm literally, when we talk about what the 9 tips are for to maintain emotional wellness in times of uncertainty, you nailed on like 7 of the 9, right? And I'm sure when I say the other 2, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I did that too. So that is why you model for them what's going on, right? Because when you're discovering this all about yourself in the process, everybody knows, it's not a big secret that like Carl Jung, like if he would have been alive during this time, I would have like gone after him on like a speed dating app because he's like my favorite. But he says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Right. So you did an excellent job. And this is one of the things I admire about you, because how much of the pain in our life is caused by us and how much of it is a result of us acting out of past pain, past prejudgments, poor perception, or repeated behaviors that no longer serve us. So when something like this hits, my experience as a coach is I saw people immediately out of fear, like turn towards old behaviors that were familiar towards them to survive, but it doesn't necessarily help them to thrive in situations like this for emotional wellness.
Yes, and I do have to mention here, as an ethnic studies teacher, I mean, it definitely disproportionately affects people who are lower class or of different races, right? There, it really exposes more all the isms and ideologies. And, it's really a privilege to be able to self-care, honestly. There are
Yes.
a lot of people in this country who are marginalized, right? And who have to deal with daily mosquito bites, as I like to call them, right? Microaggressions to actual systematic isms, right? So we're speaking to, I feel like, the people who are able to do it. And it's still hard for me to help others who literally are working 14 hours a day or don't have the time to do that, to
Yes.
care. And that's where I still am like, man, so I want to give a shout out to those who are not able to self-care, who are just surviving, and you're amazing.
Yes. And I want to say that too, because during the pandemic, people come and the normal tips you would give people for self-care, even marginalized people, like go outside and take a walk. You couldn't do that, right? I mean, we were on lockdown, or there were fires, or there were other things going on. So even the people that worked 14-hour days, then I'm like, can you just take a 5-minute break and go outside and get some fresh air? Sometimes that wasn't, the normal things I would give for self-care, like 5 minutes in a gratitude journal. Sometimes that wasn't possible for people, and so a lot of what we're going to talk about in segment 3 is part of this emotional awareness or emotional wellness is just being aware of what you're feeling and why and it's coming up for you.
Exactly.
Sitting down and having a conversation with those emotions. I'm feeling really disconnected, or I'm feeling really angry, and why? What is causing that for me? So you can make the littlest, doing your best, not perfect, but doing your best to just identify like what's going on for you there. Because when it's empowering, and I know you're all about empowering people, to realize that the power is in our hands to choose how we act or react, so we can change it to a response, because we're perceiving the world and we're bringing it all into our conscious awareness. So when we have those knee-jerk reactions, it's based on those, either a childhood experience, social conditioning, past traumas, and bias of how we've learned and been programmed to move through the world, right? So these coping mechanisms have helped us survive, but we need to heal and shift if we want a long-term solution. Right. So unless we bring it to our conscious awareness to heal it, it's going to stay rooted in our subconscious, and we're going to continue to be triggered. Right. So were you seeing that throughout your experience as an educator, or you personally, when all these things were coming up during this experience for you?
Yeah, learning where the triggers are, right? So I really feel like I'm in the resilience phase where I can start having this thought, but I can stop it. That's resilience. Like, oh, I just caught myself thinking this way. I just caught myself being judgmental. And that's exactly what mindfulness is and awareness is.
Yes.
The awareness to not let it affect you, like when Brene Brown talks about, right, forgiveness. And it's, it's so you don't have to carry something. It's not about the other person, right? And it is that, conscious awareness to heal yourself. And, it's just hard to jump into that. I have friends that are, and students, there's this fear that, it's going to hurt. There's going to be pain involved, but it's better to go through it in the long run, right? Like the mountain is you.
Yes.
Versus staying back in your old behaviors. And once you jump over 1 or 2 hoops and you get to the other side, it's like, wow, this relief, So I think it's just having the courage and the brevity to do that, because there's so much in the society against us, like, and making us think things, believe things. So if we can kind of tap back into ourselves and live from the inside out, that's the beginning of the path to resilience.
I agree with you, because like you said, the resilience is catching that thinking error, exactly like you said. And like Brene talks about the forgiveness, like you talked about, we're forgiving the person, not the behavior. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, and it frees us. And so if we stay in those old survival patterns, those old reactions solidify they become habit, and they influence how we see the world and how the world sees us. And it directs our life. And so we have this long-term pain around it. And we have these short bursts of pleasure where you're talking about, it's like, if we change our thinking around it, we go through that short-term pain to deal with it. But then we have that long-term pleasure when we start to set healthy boundaries, we change the way we see things, and we direct our life in a different direction. And then we have that power over it. So, an example is, if we stay rooted in our old behaviors and we're not willing to change the way we think about it, right? Maybe our partner tries to connect with us, we push them away because we're used to doing that. Or a student is like, I just can't learn it this way. Well, it doesn't leave any other room for it to be it. So when we bring it to the conscious, since you're doing the work, you can then say to your student, hey, so I'm noticing, no judgment and observation, totally different thing. Judgment is like, you're not doing your work. What's going on with you? Observation is, hey, so I'm noticing that you're having a difficult time getting this done, bringing it to their conscious. So you're empowering them to change the things that they can, and wise enough to be aware to let go of the things that you can't, right? If you see that it's more difficult for them, things like that.
You have to be the example. You have to be
yes.
You cannot be in a career like this without, leading by example.
Yes.
And humanizing yourself as well, with humility. We don't know it all. Nobody knows it all, but we can learn from each other, so absolutely. And that goes back to Carl Jung's collective consciousness, where there's no hierarchy. We all have currency, right? It's like cultural human currency that we all have.
Yes, I love it. Okay. Well, we're going to take a really quick break. And when we come back, we're going to continue with Lisa about the importance of education and emotional wellness and tips and solutions for all you educators out there to help. And Lisa, will you give them your information really quick of how to get a hold of you?
Sure. Yeah. You can email me at Stubenrauch, LSTUBENRAUCH @natomusunified.org. And then my personal travelmonkey80 @gmail.com. I'm also on Instagram, travelmonkey80.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm Kelly Bazzani at www.kellybazzani.com. And we will be right back with more brilliance from Lisa. Thank you.
And Kelly. Lisa and Kelly.
Lisa and Kelly. Welcome back to Maximum Resilience with me, Kelly Bazzani, and the amazing Lisa Stubenrauch. And so we are going to cover now the amazing tips because we've talked to you about the challenges that we faced with the students and educators during the pandemic, and we kind of set it up for you. And so you know me, I never leave you hanging with that. So now we're going to talk about solution-based, right? So I want to talk with Lisa about what she did with herself and the students to help with this emotional wellness. And I'm going to share some tips about how to maintain emotional wellness in times of uncertainty. So I'm going to start off, Lisa, with the importance of education. So I want to talk with you a little bit about what does that look like for you? When you talk about the broad umbrella, let's set this up for everybody in our audience. What to you is the importance of education?
Yeah, I really think it's the intra and interpersonal, again, relationships, right? And from a history perspective, not learning events and dates, but learning about history in relation to why decisions were being made, right? Because that's the psychology of things. Like what mindset, what was happening during the time period to make these decisions happen? How can we learn from them? There is the SLPC, the Southern Law Poverty Center, who indicted the KKK in the 1970s, has done amazing legal work. And I adopted their framework and curriculum, the Learning for Justice Social Standards. And then I also created the course for ethics studies. I did the curriculum for psychology and kind of mismatched all of them. together, and I came up with like 4 domains. So it's really creating a framework and like some overall objectives, right? Do you want your students to be compassionate, have a strong, develop a positive sense of identity, based on their relationships in other, multiple groups? Do you want them to understand the oppressions, celebrations, and contributions of their own people and their own cultural capital? So learning that piece about yourself and then interacting with others really tends to give a sense of justice. Then, wow, now that we see all the injustices in the world, we come together as a collective to take action. And what that looks like is expressing empathy when people are excluded or mistreated. Students recognizing their own responsibility to advocate for their own learning, to stand up to exclusion, speak up with courage and respect. So it really depends. I mean, you're curating learning experiences for sure, but it's important to what end do you want to do things, and it's important to have the students involved, because every year, every school period, even, the personalities are different. So then you create lessons around empowering your sense of self, understanding others and events that are happening in history, and then working together to create a better world for everyone.
I love that mentality, because, and you know how I work things, it takes them from feeling powerless over their circumstance or over their, and stepping into their power to empower them to feel like they're making a difference in their own lives and in their community and in the world. So it takes them from kind of feeling like victim, like even when I go into the schools for the adolescents and I talk about bullying, I never make them feel like a victim of bullying. I want them to not feel powerless. It's like, step into your power, use your voice, do what you need. So I think we have the same mentality about that, because that's when you develop that kind of curriculum and I love the psychology around it. It's like you're empowering them to be part of, not outside. So you're able to create these learning experiences for your students. So can you speak a little bit too about your ethnic studies and community circle that you did that was also so empowering for your students?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say, is that community building is so important in the beginning, especially because the pandemic, right? And just to be off the phones, meaning be present. We're going to create in this class, we're going to share our personal experiences in this class, because everyone has had has grown differently, has, experienced things differently, came from different backgrounds, whether it's religion, race. So everyone has something to bring to the table. So every Wednesday I would have students come in with something modern that upsets them, or like a social media post, or I'd have them do a reading the day before and come prepared with questions. Sometimes I would do the questions, Socratic seminar style, that we'd discuss, or they could bring up any questions that they want, and we would build a conversation and create this safe environment where we're building off of each other's perspectives. It's very much like writing a podcast episode, right? So it's,
Yes.
you pick a topic, and it could be those 4 domains that I talked about: identity, power, justice, action. It could be, for ethnic studies, the 4 foundational groups, meaning historically silenced groups: African American, Asian Pacific Islander, Desi, Chican, Latinx, and Native Indigenous. So from the perspective of them, and not just, also not to be negative, but positive, right? Okay, these are the struggles. There was enslavement, there was all this negative stuff, but what were the contributions? What are we celebrating, right? And then, so what are we celebrating about ourselves, our people? So it's very much every Wednesday we would come together and we would just do a lot of discussion and community building with each other.
Well, I love, that's going to lead us right into what I want to talk about, because that's the emotional resilience, right? You're creating this safe environment to heal and nurture these positive relationships where they might not have that. Like you were saying, at home, they might be coming from, feeling really isolated or lonely. And so I want to talk about this emotional resilience, because when we talk about these 9 tips, let's just get into it, Lisa. When we talk about these 9 tips to maintain emotional wellness in times of uncertainty, what is that, right? This term refers to an awareness and an understanding and acceptance of your emotions and the ability to deal with challenges and change. Boom, right? Like you just defined that for us beautifully. So it's remaining in the present moment. And it's because that's vital to emotional health. That was something that was really difficult, right? Because people are like, what if, how long, what's going to happen way out here? And what I'm hearing you say is like, we got really present in those classrooms, right? It would have been really easy to focus on all the negative, right? But that emotional resilience is like, not that toxic positivity of like, everything's great, rose-colored glasses, right? That's not what we're talking about here. But it is, the first is like, be positive. It's okay to be in a bad mood once in a while, right? We all get there. I get there. I was there last week, right? But it's looking at things positively and looking at the possibilities available to you, but also remaining realistic about what the circumstance is, like you talked about, right?
Yes. And the important thing is, right, and I think for teachers too, and for me, it's like, what does that look like? Which what you were saying, right? So how do you create this healthy self-esteem, this resilience? And one of the things I did was use, it's attributed to the Blackfoot Nation, so Indigenous Blackfoot Nation, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
And we look at, right, physiological needs. It's a triangle, right? So if you don't have food, water, sleep, then you won't be able to graduate to the next level, which is, I think, safety, right? So it's that safety, self-esteem, transcendence. So if you have all of these things, then you start to self-actualize. And that's kind of where, wow, your well is full for yourself. Now you can give to others and work together.
Yes. And I want to kind of bounce off of that, right? Because one of my favorite books is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der. And when you look at that book, he talks about that. He's like, your body stores trauma, your body stores. So, and it starts with that bottom hierarchy of need: food, water, connection, those physiological needs. And if those aren't being met, your body is going to be in a constant fight, flight, or freeze response.
Good.
We were in that, right? So you're providing, these self-care journals. I'm going to mention that for you because you forgot that. Okay. You were having them do these self-care journals, right? You're providing this safe environment. And so while you're holding on to these positive emotions a little bit, and it's giving that immune system also a boost, to maintain and get through the day a little bit smoother. Not that every day is going to be like, hey, right? But like you're giving them the tools and the coping skills necessary and the strategies to remain resilient and manage stress when larger personal issues arise. And so it improves your overall mental health, right? So the first one, like you just covered, is be positive, right? And so you're giving yourself credit for the things you do well every day. And you already covered this one too. I'm gonna just give you like some shout outs here. So like you said, forgive yourself and others, learn from what went wrong. We don't dwell on it, right? We forgive the person, not the behavior. You also said this: surround yourself with positive, healthy people, right? And let go of the connections that don't. Explore your beliefs about the meaning and purpose of life and use them to guide your decisions, like you spoke about. Okay, the number 2 thing that you already spoke about for maintaining this emotional health is get connected. Okay, because we had so much isolation and things like that. So our social connections can have a powerful effect on our emotional and physical health. You created those circles because you were doing it in your own life, getting connected with healthy, mature relationships. So the third thing, relieving stress. So stress is normal. We're not going to be without stress in our life, okay? But chronic stress is the high alert for harm and more good, right? So you talked about this too. You were getting sleep, 30 minutes a day of new input or stress relief, right? Building your social support, setting priorities on what you needed to get done, noting what you got accomplished at the end of the day. I always say, like, don't determine your worth on your to-do list.
Right.
Because I'll tell you, if I determine my worth on my to-do list, my worth would be like this big, because I've always got a to-do list, right? But I can say at the end of the day, like, oh, I got those 2 things done on my to-do list. I'm really proud of myself, right? Mindfulness, like you spoke about, meditation, whatever helps you with deep breathing, 4 square breathing. Anybody can do 4 square breathing. Anybody can do it, right? So those little types of things, creating more time in nature, you touched on that. Quality sleep is number 4. You spoke about that. I was getting more sleep, right? Overall sleep helps our mental and physical health. Number 5, you already nailed in segment 2, establishing boundaries. Okay. The feeling of having too much to do can cause that frustration or anxiety. Okay. Having clear priorities, letting people know what you will or will not tolerate. Like Brene Brown says, a boundary is not a boundary if it is not enforced. So you prioritizing what needed to get done helped you be focused and clear on your purpose of educating.
100%.
I can't get that done right now. I've got a meeting tomorrow at school at noon. Okay. So that was number 5. Number 6, be mindful. How many times did you talk about mindfulness in this segment? Okay. Being completely aware of what's happening. If you're experiencing that toxic positivity, everything's fine. You can't be mindful of what it is your students need. Okay. So you can't be on autopilot. So number 7, coping skills. How many coping skills did you just identify that you were helping your students with? But in your own life, Lisa, I just want you to speak about how did you develop your toolkit for coping skills so that you were able to give them to your students?
Yeah, I had to practice what I preached, right? So,
Yeah.
like, honestly, if I'm saying the students, even essays, reading essays, like, but I'm a horrible essay writer. How could I be, it's almost like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, you have to live as they live. Like, I can't say something without doing it myself. So at one point with all my lessons, I had done it for myself at some point first.
So I'm hearing integrity.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to teach on anything you haven't done in your own personal life. So you humanize the experience.
For the most part, and ethics studies was different because we were learning together. So it's like this inflation deflation of a balloon of integrity, but also, wow, you're here with people in the space for the first time and co-creating together. So honoring others' perspectives and honoring others' lived experiences and using that to dictate what we learn that day.
Yes. And that's why I love, right, the infinity, because we're giving life to each other through our shared experience.
It's fluid and always going, yes.
Right. And so that's why the students are able to so closely relate to you, because you're like, me too. Right? Like, I'm learning with you. So I'm not talking at you, I'm talking with you. Which leads us to number 8, which is accept yourself. Right? We're our harshest critic. And we set these expectations and limitations on our lives and our behaviors that we wouldn't set for other people. So what I'm hearing you say is like, I had to learn with them sometimes.
Yeah. And I would say it to them. That's the humility part, right? I don't know it all. And also, that self-care, it's just like, especially seniors coming, can you grade this, late work, all the stuff I said. And one thing I always say, I'm like, there's one of me and 183 of you.
Yes.
So humanize yourself and they'll understand.
And vulnerability, right? Which ends up being your greatest strength. That's number 8 for emotional wellness, right? So it talks about, the positive affirmations, being around things that inspire you, letting go of what you think perfection looks like. There is no way on God's green earth that during this pandemic, anybody was going to do anything perfect. It was brand new to all of us. So you being like, hey, I'm doing the best that I can, gave your students permission to not have to do things perfectly, and them go, Miss Lisa's doing things the best she can, so we're going to do things the best that we can, right? So you're making a conscious effort to stop assuming you know what people mean too. Because when people are in uncertainty, you got to get real clear and specific with what you want and need and making those requests. So, you forgive the mistakes you made, you're forgiving the mistakes others made, and you believe you can do anything because you can. So you stop putting those limitations on yourself and you're like, I got to get creative here.
Yes.
I got to go inside. All the answers are within me, right? I saw my sister posting things during the pandemic. It's like she was writing, she would put a piece of paper over her window, the sun would come in so she could write her math stuff for her kids. And I'm like, that's brilliant, right? So you figure out what motivates you by celebrating something, like you said, you might be bad at. You're like, I might not be this great at things, but I'm going to try it at. So it's in our failures. And I want to say this really clearly, because it happened to me too during the pandemic. It's in our failures, not our successes, that we learn the most about ourselves. If we don't try, we never know what we're capable of. And I just want to commend you on that, because when we would speak all the time, you're like, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I'm going to give it a shot, and da-da-da. And then you call and be like, oh my God, it worked out brilliantly, right? But it was because you accepted yourself where you were at, and you knew your purpose, and you knew your intrinsic why. And it led to that longevity and sustainability, right, of that emotional wellness.
And also making mistakes. I mean, when I make a mistake, I own it. Or like I had a situation this in ethics studies, I had a newer student, and then another student who was my senior takeover. She was amazing. She taught the whole day, was brave enough to approach me and say, hey, when you did that earlier, it ended up making this other student feel a certain way. And immediately I took care of the conversation. I said, thank you so much for trusting me with telling me that. Right. So mistakes like are the biggest thing to learn from. And the way I approached content one time, I had emailed my students' moms, and I said, I totally recognize that the student, was upset, and this is what my intention was. And I even did a feelings wheel, X, Y, and Z. And they wrote me this beautiful email back, like, thank you for being cognizant. Right. So it's just, we got to get better at not being punitive for mistakes, but really, if we hold accountability, if we take accountability, then it's a growing experience.
That's it. And our flow is just perfect today, because that's the last one, right? Asking for help and leading into emotional health. That's what it talks about. Like, be curious and open for feedback, be transparent and honest about where you're at, right? Because emotional health refers to how a person is able to manage their thoughts, feelings, and emotions through the ups and downs of life. I'm not hearing that you got reactive. I'm not hearing that you got defensive. I'm not hearing all of that, right? So someone with good emotional health and emotional wellness is aware of their emotions and has strategies to deal with both everyday situations and traumatic experiences. So why is that important? It's important because they're in control of their thoughts, feelings, and actions. Okay. And so it's a key of fostering resilience, self-awareness, and an overall sense of well-being. And you can hear from what Lisa's saying is it didn't happen overnight for her. It's a process, and she continues to work on it, and she continues to learn and grow. But as she does it, though, it helps guide her and how she observes and interprets others around her and what they're doing and why. And so having those skills to maintain good emotional health is key if we want to succeed and thrive in our professional and personal lives. I'm going to say that again. Having these skills to maintain good emotional health is key if we want to succeed and thrive in our professional and personal lives. And I want to say, because we need to close up and I want Lisa to leave us with a message, the difference between mental health and emotional health is mental health is very much broader than emotional health. So mental health is not just the absence of mental illness. Mental health is a state of being where every individual realizes their own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and can work productively. It's closely connected with how productively and easily we engage with our world over time without causing ourselves distress. So I want Lisa to leave us. I could have talked for Lisa. We're going to have to do another segment because I need to keep going. But will you leave us with a message, please, as we end today?
Yeah, I just, self-care is the best care. Don't be afraid to feel and speak your truth and find support systems. There's always someone out there for you. And I just want to use this time to really thank students, colleagues, Kelly. Throughout my journey, you all have inspired me, given me hope to really counteract challenges, oppressions that have occurred outside and within myself. I really feel like I'm my best self right now, and I want to give to others. So I just want to express myself and say thank you to everyone. And in self-expression, just trust yourself, trust your trust your intuition. I'm a better educator and a better person because of all the experiences and my students and colleagues that I've interacted with.
Thank you, Lisa. And I will say that I'm so honored to have you here today. And you are the definition of emotional resilience, emotional agility, grace. And I'm so honored to know you and love you. And you have done the work to be here today. And as that, everybody gets to see the benefit and experience you as your best self, myself included, your friendships, your students, and everybody that loves and knows you. So please reach out to Lisa if you want support or guidance. You will not regret that decision. So Lisa, please one more time, give them your information before we close.
Yeah, I am on Instagram at travelmonkey80. You can email me at travelmonkey80@gmail.com. I am a curriculum specialist, so I am happy and I totally nerd out on creating lesson plans and learning experiences for anyone, from students. I've done company trainings, so I would love to collaborate.
Yes, please reach out. And I'm Kelly Bazzani, www.myresilience.com, and I will be taking my podcast to my own YouTube channel. So I will be posting about that. And thank you all for your love and support. And I love you, Lisa. And everybody, please reach out. You are never alone. We do recover. Thank you and have a beautiful June. Thank you for listening to Maximum Resilience with me, Kelly Bazzani, your ally for addiction. Tune in the first Monday of each month at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on transformationtalkradio.com. Engage in this epic journey of how to own your power and the steps to take that lead you towards an incredible life of maximum resilience. We do recover. Experience the transformation from addiction to living your best life. For more information about maximum resilience and me, Kelly Bazzani, visit myresiliencecoach.com. That's myresiliencecoach.com.